Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining this session. Dear speakers and participants, I'm very pleased to welcome you to this session, Demystifying SEACAPs for Cities, hear from experts and African cities on their experience, which is part of the COMSA Day proceedings at the Climate Change Summit 2021. This session includes experts as well as city officials who will bring different perspectives and experiences with sustainable energy and climate action plans, what we call SEACAPs or PIDEC in French. I don't know in Portuguese, sorry. I am Marianne Cerf, the COMSA project coordinator for Expertise France, and I'm very honored to be the moderator of this session today. Expertise France is the French Agency for International and Technical Expertise and is one of the 4 member state organizations in charge of implementing the COMSA. Since 2019, the COMSA is indeed implemented in 18 cities in 11 countries by the Spanish cooperation, AICID, the German cooperation, GIZ, and the French cooperation, AFD, together with Expertise France. Before we start the session, please allow me to remind you some rules to ensure the success of the session. If you need any translation into French or Portuguese, it is available. You can click on the interpretation icon. The format of the session is a Zoom meeting, so the participants will be able to unmute themselves, turn on their videos, and use the chat functions. We ask the participants, however, to please respect the speakers and stay muted during their presentations. If you want to ask a question to a speaker, you can use at any time the chat function to introduce yourself, write your questions, and the questions will be read by the moderator to the speakers during the Q&A session. Now I would like to recall a few facts from the COMSA. I'm sure that many of you attended the opening session this morning, where we had excellent speakers sharing their experiences, as well as the director of ICLE Africa explaining the details of COMSA, the SEACAP development, and even some results of the initiative to date. So I will be very short on this. As most of you, I'm sure, already know, the Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa initiative is a European Union program that supports the external dimension of the European Green Deal as the global challenge of climate change and environmental degradation require a global response. At the same time, COMSA moves to strengthen the Africa-EU partnership and supports Agenda 2063 of the African Union Commission. COMSA is, as many of you know, the regional chapter of an international alliance of cities, the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, GCOM. It is a partnership between city networks, development agencies, and funding institutions, supporting cities in meeting the dual challenge of climate change and access to sustainable energy to
Dear all, we're so sorry about that. We seem to have lost the connection of our moderator. Please bear with us for a minute. We hope to get her back soon. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Just while we wait for Marianne, who is our moderator for this session, I would like to maybe move on to our first speaker. And of course, we hope that Marianne will join as soon as possible. So our first speaker we have today is Kirsty Griffin. She is from ENG, Africa, and we are very excited that she is joining us today. She's a senior professional officer in the climate change, energy and resilience work stream here at ENG Africa. She has nearly a decade of experience working in the climate change sector, with particular focus on supporting local and subnational governments in the development of sustainable energy access and climate action plans. She supports local governments in responding and reporting on climate change actions, and also is a climate change adaptation expert. So good morning to you, Kirsty. It's so great to have you as part of this session. We have two questions for you. If you could firstly, please, explain in your experience what the keys to success are in terms of developing a climate action plan, or SEACAP. And then secondly, what are the next steps for taking a SEACAP forward from plan to action? These are two questions that we get as the COMSA Secretariat from our signatories. So it would be good to know your response in terms of those two. Over to you.
Thanks, Tara, and thank you so much for introducing me. You made me sound very impressive. So as Tara said, my focus at ENG has really been supporting cities across the African continent with developing GCOM compliant climate action plans, or CAPs as they're known, and then in more recent years working with GIZ to support the development of SEACAPs in 4 cities in across Africa. So the first question is around what do I think are my keys to success in developing a climate action plan, or SEACAP? I guess my lessons for success come from both developing CAPs as well as SEACAPs, but for the purposes of today, I will focus on the SEACAP lessons learned. So as we know, a SEACAP is typically developed in 3 phases, namely a baseline, setting targets, and then developing actions. So today I thought I'd pull out some key lessons from each of those 3 phases. So the first is around our baseline. So one of the biggest hurdles to starting the SEACAP journey is developing these baseline reports. In many African cities, there's often little to no data, and one can get quite bogged down in the gathering of perfect data. And when it's not found, it can really delay the process of firstly developing the baseline assessments, but developing the SEACAP too. Next slide, please, Tara. The key to moving these assessments along quickly so we can get the targets and actions is to work with what is available. Use proxy data tools if they exist, and if possible, generate your own data if needed. So in terms of working with what is available, the city usually has a surprising amount of data within it, but normally in quite unexpected places. So the key here is to create a really good network within the city whom you can ask key questions to get those little bits of information or data you need to complete your baseline reports. Additionally, there is a huge wealth of tools and resources out there that are being developed all the time to support the swift development of these baseline reports. One example is something we call the Proxy data tool. This has been developed by ENG Africa and GIZ. This specifically supports the development of baseline emissions inventories by downscaling national emissions data to the city level. So essentially you can get a snapshot of what's happening at the city. And then failing that, if budget allows, you can always develop your own data by undertaking surveys or something similar. But this can be really costly and time consuming. So better to use what you have and work with the city where you can and use proxy data to accelerate the process. The second step in our process is setting targets. And when we set targets, too often these are very lofty or quite ill-defined, and it makes it very difficult to achieve later on if they're not very clear. Next slide. For targets to be achievable, we ask for them to be what we call SMART. So they need to be specific to what you want to achieve. They need to be measurable. So how will you track that progress? They need to be achievable. Is this something that can be done with the resources we have and the budget we have? They need to be realistic. Is this actually a feasible option for us? And last but not least, they need to be time-based. They have to have a clear end date and of when the target needs to be achieved by. And my biggest lesson here is the clearer and more quantifiable the targets are, the easier they are to measure and the easier they are to achieve. The last phase, obviously, is our action developments. These also need to be very clear and very specific. So similar to our targets, the actions must also be smart. What is it that you really want to achieve? Is this realistic in the time frame you actually have? And ideally, they should be in some kind of instruction. So it should be very clear who's taking this action on. Remember, it's not always the person writing the action that has to do it later, what they actually have to take forward. Key lessons here is they must be directly linked to the targets you have set. The action should also be in line with the city's current development goals, policies, and plans. And the more specific, clear, and simple your actions are with the associated details such as budget or who's going to implement, the more clearly defined they'll be and the easier they are to take forward. Next slide, please. And the last thing I wanted to touch on is the importance of cities' buy-in. Throughout the development process, without a doubt, the biggest lesson learned I've had is it's critical that everyone who will be involved in the SEACAP implementation is involved in the development process. This is so there's a sense of ownership to the SEACAP. And to create this ownership, the SEACAP should be co-developed with the city. They should be involved in each step of the process, updated regularly, be invited to draft those actions themselves based on their understanding of what the city needs to have happen on the ground. Before all of our analysis gets involved in the background, we really need to understand what they want to achieve. And they should have a chance to be involved in the communication process too. Our biggest lesson here is the more involved the city is in the process, the more they'll want it to succeed. So those, I would say, I have quite a short amount of time to talk, but those I would say are my key elements for the first question. The second question was around what are the next steps for taking a SEACAP forward from plan to action? So next slide, please, Tara. So assuming here we now have the SEACAP done, everyone's been involved from the beginning, how now do we get it from being a beautifully put together SEACAP document to actually being implemented? And I have quite a few lessons learned from here, but I'll keep it to the main ones. So the first step is you now have the SEACAP. It's probably massive because there's a lot of information that goes in there. So I'd say the first step here is map out who is in charge of what action. So firstly, we need to confirm who's in charge of doing what and map this out. This entails looking at the actions included in the SEACAP and firstly separating them out into who can implement what. So it's very clear what each party needs to do to take it forward. Typically, this involves separating the actions that can be implemented by the city, then separating those actions per department, and I'll tell you why in a second, and then separating the rest of the actions into those that need to be externally funded, and I'll circle back to that in a moment. So just focusing on the cities for the moment, how do they take their actions forward? So essentially, my biggest message here, and next slide please, Tara, it's critical, and I can't emphasize this enough, to include or mainstream the actions into your development plans, as if they're not there, they're not going to be included in the city's mandates, and nor will budget be allocated to them. So this will vary between the cities. So it could be that actions, as I mentioned earlier, they need to be separated out into departments. So you might have all the water related actions going into a water and sanitation plan that's already in existence. You might have some transport related actions that could then go into the transport development plan, or there might be an overarching city plan. But the main message here that I really want to emphasize is it's really critical that wherever the actions go, they need to be embedded either in separate plans or an overarching plan into existing city mandates. As if they're not there, budget will not flow these. So you can have the most beautiful plan in the world, but it could just end up on a shelf if you don't do this mainstream process. For this to happen, it means that actions need to be presented to the relevant council meeting and are included in the updates of these plans. And as this is a process the city can drive, it's really, really essential that they have that sense of ownership, which means ideally they should be involved in the process from the beginning. The last part is how do external parties take their actions forward? So for all the actions that are not for the cities or they need to be externally funded, one of the ways to start this process is to develop action roadmaps. This means thinking through each detail of those external actions and pulling together an accurate budget if this has not been done already, and clearly articulating each step in the process of action implementation. If possible, this means grouping actions into projects for specific funders, because each funder has a very different idea of what they want to fund. And if we do that, we actually increase the chance of actions being implemented where the city can't cover those themselves. And my final point, next slide, Tara, is communication, communication, communication. It's important that the SEACAP actions are communicated to a wide audience, as the more people who know about it, the more people will support the implementation and the greater your chance of success. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you very much, Kirsty, for this very interesting presentation. I'm back with you after a short disconnection. And now let me please introduce our next speaker. We have Mr. Matheus Ortega from C40. Matheus Ortega serves as Senior Manager for Climate Action at the Urban Shift C40 team. His role is to build capacity and support urban shift cities so that they can commit to more ambitious targets to accelerate climate action. He is leading the development of City Academy module and regional training sessions on integrated climate action planning. Prior to this, Matheus was the C40 city advisor for Salvador in Brazil, working from within the city hall to coordinate the development of the city's first ever climate action plan. Before joining C40, Matheus worked as head of future cities for the UK government in Brazil. He led the design and delivery of a £60 million Prosperity Fund program in smart transportation and water management in collaboration with international partners such as the World Bank and UN Habitat. He also worked as project manager in areas such as climate smart city planning, sustainable mobility, urban infrastructure, solid waste management, and sustainable social housing in several Brazilian cities. Matheus has a BA in International Relations and a Master of Science in International Development and Humanitarian Emergencies from the London School of Economics. Matheus, we are listening to you.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here with all of you. For those of you who don't know Salvador, where I live, Salvador is in Brazil. It is the blackest city outside of Africa because of the African descent. So it is a city that has a lot of the African traditions and culture, a very interesting artistic city near the beach, an amazing place to live. And here I worked together with C40 to develop Salvador's first climate action plan. And the challenges were many. I know that we have people from lots of different cities here. If I am to say perhaps the three main challenges we had, one of them was the poverty context, inequality. We have around 1/3 of the population living in poverty. So this means that it's very difficult to focus on the climate change agenda when you have a very critical poverty issue, and most of the budget and the public policy will focus on that agenda. So what we tried to do was to connect the poverty agenda with the climate agenda. And by doing that, this brought more political leverage to our work. Another challenge is informality. This is a big challenge we have in Salvador because there are lots of people living in the hillsides informally. So many times the rainfalls and the extreme weather events would bring some critical situation to these people, but they were not formally living there. So that made things more difficult in terms of public policy. And another challenge, as Kirsty said, is the technical challenge. Many times data is not easily available. So we faced a couple of challenges, but we managed to deliver a very robust climate action plan here in Salvador, which is now being used as a reference for other cities in other countries, especially cities that are not in developed countries, because it's a very different process when you have to deal with the poverty context in developing country cities. So to say a bit about what is C40's template or model towards climate action planning, I would say that the most important thing is for the climate action plan to be science-based. A plan is just a written piece of paper if it's not with strong arguments and based on science. So the effort is to have the mitigation and adaptation aspect of it very well documented with a scientific background, with the projections of emissions, with an analysis of the risk assessment in the city, so that when you get to the decision of actions and when you have to discuss with the public and open up for public participation, you have strong arguments for the climate actions you are focusing on. And just to give one example, to be really frank about our process in Salvador, we had a lot of opposition from civil society, especially because of the political background of an elections year. But we had opposition. So what we had to do was to have a very strong scientific argument explaining why those actions we put in the plan were actually prioritized. And because we had the science backup, that allowed the mayor and the secretaries and the responsible people to back up and defend the plan. Something else that was also very challenging is the fact that the city has a lot of plans already. This is a bit what Kirsty said too. The city already has a sanitation plan, a waste plan, a transport plan, urban planning, master plan. So there are several different kinds of plans in the city. So what will make the climate action plan or the SEACAP something that will be implementable? I think the critical thing here, and I'll say a bit about the lessons learned. I'll say 5 lessons learned. So the first one, how to make a CAP something implementable. The first one is cross-departmental work. Like Kirsty said again, mainstreaming, integrating, having different types of departments involved in the process. I did a research on the C40 climate action plans that were launched last year in cities like Accra or Quito in Ecuador or Rio in Brazil. And the average number of departments involved in leading actions were 18. So that's a lot of different departments involved in the climate action planning actions, or the actual implementation of it. So that means that you actually need a very strong cross-departmental work if you want to deliver the actions. A second lessons learned would be having a strong focal point. Having a department, a sustainability department or a climate change department, someone who will actually own the plan and who will promote it internally within the city, externally with partners, someone who will actually consider that as his own son or daughter, you know, like having a person or a secretariat, a department that will be the focal point. That's also critical, because if you don't have that, the risk is that the plan will just not have a follow-through, a follow-up on all its development. The third lesson learned, I would say, is there is such a strong need for political buy-in. If the mayor doesn't want the plan, it will be very difficult to implement it. So the first step that we always put ahead in the C40 process is to achieve political buy-in, have the mayor to commit or to write or sign some kind of commitment that will make the city look at this issue as a priority. The fourth lessons learned, community engagement. The plan should not only be something led by the city and cross-departmental with other departments, but it should be something that the people are aware of and that they can share also their thoughts on how should a climate action plan be. Just to give one example, I was visiting a neighborhood, a community in Salvador, and they were having lots of problems with landsliding, because when it rained, the heavy rainfalls would throw all the garbage that were thrown in the hillsides down to the houses and would destroy the houses and even bring risk to the lives. So when we went to that place, we went and asked them, why do you throw your garbage, your waste on the hillsides? Because that is causing the landslides. And they responded saying, we don't have a place where we can put our waste. We need to walk for 1 kilometer so that the garbage trucks can collect our waste. So it's too far away. That's why we throw in the hillsides. So understanding what's going on with the communities makes a lot of difference when planning as well, because or else you're gonna create a plan that is very formal, that fits into the requirements, but that doesn't actually reach to the communities and to the people. And the fifth lesson learned, I have to say, is about being very analytical, science-based, and technical. Many times cities will hire consultancies or organizations that will support with this kind of work, because it is really critical to follow through with the data and to have the proper data in the baseline so that you can make actions on top of those of that data. So data management is something important. Knowing what are the numbers in the city is something important. In the case of Salvador, we had a lot of challenge with that because the data was not under the same department. The data was spread out across the city with different kinds of departments. So the data on water management was with a different institution. The data on mobility was with a different one. So then when we had to compile the plan, we had to get together with all these different people in order to bring the data and create a solid plan. So that's one that's challenging, but very important. So going to my final part of my, my presentation here about financing and implementation. So I'll just give one example. I think this is helpful. I hope this is helpful for you. Here in Salvador, we had 53 actions in the climate action plan. And the actions that are there are like a window of opportunity for financing, because you have a public plan signed by the mayor saying, we want to do this. This helps a lot when trying to get financing from external partners and even internally within the finance department in the city. So to give one example, we put there in the plan that the city was interested in developing its solar energy and finding alternative ways of financing for solar energy. There was no clear action out of this, but it was there. It was a strategy. So then this year, after the plan was launched, we were able to secure funding for technical support to create a solar energy law. And that's because we had that action inside the plan. If we didn't have the action inside the plan, it would be much more difficult because the financing comes when there is some kind of solid technical analysis from the city. So what I'm saying is, in order to achieve financing and to actually deliver the actions of your climate action plan, you will most likely need to insert there with a science basis, what are the actions that you want to deliver? And then afterwards, when you reach out to the organizations like C40 has some financing, GIZ or the World Bank, African Development Bank, you will have a solid plan that is scientifically based, analytical, that is cross-departmental within different city officials, that has a political buy-in from the mayor, that has had engagement from the civil society, and then you can reach out to the organizations and find financing for your plan. So these are some tips I have to give. Hope this is helpful and happy to connect afterwards as well. It's been a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you very much, Matthias, for these very clear and informative presentations and all your concrete examples and tips. I think they will be very useful for most of our participants here. I would like now to introduce our third speaker, who is from Kasese in Uganda. This is Mr. Anthony Philippe Emenyo. Anthony is the Agriculture Officer of Kasese Municipality and head of the production department. With over 7 years of experience, Anthony has been working with Kasese Municipality since 2014. In the municipality, he mostly coordinates the implementation of various agricultural livelihoods interventions. However, in the recent past, he also worked in energy transition research, was actively involved in the SEACAP development process with the support from the Kampala Capital City Authority, and is now one of the leads in the prioritization and development of intervention under the next phase of COMESSA initiative with the support of Expertise France. So, Anthony, we would like to hear a little bit about your experience in developing a SEACAP with the support of another city who had already this experience, which is the Kampala Capital City Authority. And we would like to know, now that your SEACAP is approved, what will be the next step in developing the projects that you have prioritized?
Thank you, Marianne, for the wonderful introduction. Let's go to the presentation, please. The presentation pin, the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint. Can you hear me?
I'm not the one in charge of putting the PowerPoint, so.
All right, then.
But I can do it. I can do it anyways. Just okay. I'll do it because maybe.
Sorry, Marianne, I actually don't have that in the slide deck. If you can play it from your side.
I have access to the sharing screen. Sorry for this. Here we go. There we go. Can everyone see it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No.
Is it charging somehow?
Marianne, if you have two screens, maybe bring it to your primary screen.
Stuck now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay,
yes.
You can hear me, but somehow my screen is stuck. Ah, okay. Let's try again. Yeah. Is it working this time?
Oh, yes, it's working.
Sorry.
Let's just go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Kasese is located in the western part of Uganda, and it sits at the foothills of Mount Rwenzori, which also happens to be a World Heritage Site. Coincidentally, the municipality is bordered by two national parks, the Queen Elizabeth National Park and then the Mount Rwenzori National Park. It sits 420 kilometers from the capital city of Uganda, Kampala, and approximately 55.5 kilometers from the Uganda Democratic Republic of Congo border. Now, just like most developing municipalities in their early transition stages, Kasese has a relatively large agricultural population with more than 50% of the population as of 2014 dependent in one way or another on subsistence agriculture. But most importantly, the city is traversed by a river that ever since 2014, 1st May, has developed a habit of flooding annually. And because of this challenge of the annual flooding of the river, which has been linked to the melting of the glaciers atop Mount Rwenzori, the municipal administration and the larger district leadership generally has been keen in undertaking climate-related actions in a bid to secure the future of the municipality and of the district generally. Let's move to the next slide. And next slide, please. Ever since 2017, we started taking strides towards addressing some of these climate actions, and this started with a partnership with KCCA that specifically started in October. In this partnership, KCCA took up Kasese along with Entebbe municipality to be supported in development of their SEACAPs. At that time, Kasese had not yet joined the SEACAP, COMSA, I mean. Now, in August 2018, the municipality council finally passed a resolution to join COMSA, and the consent letter communicating this resolution was submitted in September of the very same year. 1 year later, in August 2019, that's when the municipality received its a team of consultants. One handled the greenhouse gas emissions, and then the other handling the vulnerability assessment. These consultants were sourced locally from Makerere University, which is the leading university in Uganda. And coincidentally, they had some experience working in the area. So it was relatively easy for them to navigate and traverse the dynamics of the local culture and population. Now, in between August 2018 and August 2019, the works that were undertaken around were mainly procurement of the consultants that was being undertaken at KCCA, the mother supporting institution during this process. Now, between September and November 2019, just a month after the inception, we started the data collection in the municipality. The data collection took various forms. Some of them included individual interviews with various stakeholders, like the managers and data managers of various utility service companies, the aerodrome, Kilembe mines, and a few local leaders. Then, of course, they also had public consultations, mainly with the main affected communities along the Nyamwamba River Valley, and some communities in the areas that were considered to be hot climate, highly vulnerable to climate variabilities. And then a lot of field visits were also conducted, mainly to verify some of the information that came from the various interviews and public engagements. And of course, these were supplemented by review of various literature from previous studies in Kasese. Kasese privileged to have been involved in a project called Sunset, where a number of documentations like the Sustainable Energy Strategy was developed, the State of Energy Report, and also working with the district. We had the district poverty profiling and mapping. There was the district environmental action plan, and all these documents ended up informing the SEACAP development process, along with the 5-year development plan that was running at the time, and of course the municipal annual work plan that was running from July 2019 to December, to June 2020. Now, after this data collection process, the team went into the analysis phase, and in March 2020, a few months later, we went into the action planning and the validation phase. Now, in the action planning phase, most of the participants were those who contributed to the data in the data collection phase. And we also brought in a number of partners whom we felt would be very, very important in implementation of some of these actions. Most of these included local leaders, a few CSOs working within the energy and climate sector in the municipality, the utility companies, the local hotel and the eating places, a local power station, and a number of others. And this exercise was highly participatory. We went into phases of 3 different phases of meeting, with different stakeholder groups. And then we went into a final phase that brought in all the different stakeholders in a bid to consolidate the different views. After this phase, the team went into the compilation, and we received the final version of our SEACAP from the KCCA team in September 2020. And in April 2021, our council approved the SEACAP. This entire process from the inception and the receiving of the consultants to finalization and approval of the SEACAP took us 19 months and was coordinated by the Municipal Environment Officer. Let's go to the next slide, please. In the next slide, I mainly make mention of some of the key stakeholders and the data sources that we've had. But I'd like to draw your attention to the technical planning committee, the select technical staff, and the technical planning committee. A previous presenter has mentioned very many departments being involved. The mode of operation in the municipality is that all the departmental heads are part of a committee called the Technical Planning Committee. And this committee was very, very actively engaged in the SEACAP process, along with the Municipal Executive Committee that coordinates the political arm. Now, a number of companies mentioned in this list, the utility companies like the National Water and Storage Corporation, the Electricity Distribution Company, the Aerodrome, the Power Generation Company. We have hotels represented here, secondary schools, meaning we went in to collect data from any stakeholder that we felt was relevant, and all of them formed a part of the planning process and validation of the data. This was very important for us because we figured them as the implementing partners, so we had to set targets within their limits. The entire process of the validation was coordinated by the consultancy team from Makerere University. That also did the data collection to make sure that we keep the science as close to the practice as possible. The final slide, please. This entire process wouldn't have been possible without, first of all, the support from the EU, the support from the COMSA Secretariat, and more specifically, KCCA that took us in and worked with us throughout the process. Makerere University that supported us in the data collection, validation, and processing. And then the Kasese District local government, the mother district, that had undertaken some of the environmental related studies before, and whose documents we relied on heavily in supporting this entire process. Now, there was a question on what we are going to do moving forward. What are the plans? Interestingly, in the Kasese context, we received the Nyamamba River again flooded on around 7th July this year. And this provoked a lot of reaction from the national government. So currently we already have teams of consultants doing various works along the Nyamamba Valley. And this addresses some of the actions we had identified could be addressed as part of our COMSA 3 initiative. However, beyond the Nyamamba Valley, we've been working with Expertise France to develop some of the priority actions. Some of the actions include the working on the urban forest management and tree planting. In a bid to afforest the town, we are working on mapping the wetlands in the municipality and developing comprehensive wetlands action plans. And we're talking of developing an energy quality management system as part of this same initiative. And the focus in this entire process is building the local capacity to be able to move forward after all the consultants. In this entire process, we are working to reach out to a number of stakeholders, partners to move forward. And I'm very happy and privileged that I'm talking to you today. And I'm looking forward to working with you in the next projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anthony, and I think it will be also a pleasure for us to work with you on this exciting SEACAP implementation. So indeed, Kasese was today the first of the 3 cities to present its experience in SEACAP development with completed SEACAP. And now we are going to listen to another city, which is in the middle of the process, let's say, which is Bobo Dioulasso in Burkina Faso. We will hear Mrs. Chantal Cambiré. Mrs. Chantal Cambiré is here today with us, but because of problem of connection, she preferred to pre-record a video, so we will listen to the video. Let me briefly introduce Chantal with her biography. Sorry. So Mrs. Chantal Cambiré is the president of the Organisation de la Jeunesse Féminine, the young women organization, OGF, and has experience in working with the World Health Organization in Burkina Faso. More will be said in the video, so I will let our technical assistants launch the video so that we can hear Chantal. Thank you.
Alors, nous sommes ici aujourd'hui avec Madame Chantal Cambiré, qui est la présidente.
Cambiré, she is the president of the Youth Women in Burkina Faso. Mrs. Cambiré, would you mind starting by introducing yourself and explain to us what you are doing in Bobo? I'm Mrs. Chantal Cambiré. I'm a school teacher. I'm the president of the organization for the women youth in Bobo Dioulasso. What was the role of your organization and civil society in general in the elaboration of the SEACAP? During that process, the women youth organization took part actively with other organizations of the civil society and other bodies, actively participated in the climate action plan energy of the Bobo municipality from the start. Since we prioritized our actions and the assessment of our priorities and the elaboration of the climate action plan, we have been taken part actively with other organizations, other services in the municipality, and other organization of the civil society. We took part in the whole process. Do you think that these other groups of the civil society that you are mentioning took advantage of their participation in the process by becoming more aware of the issues regarding climate change and how to adapt? Yes, I would say yes. All the entities that took part, including our organization for youth, young women, they all took great advantage of this process. The workshops were good that we took part in, helped us to be more aware of the importance of the energy climate plan of our municipality, Bobo Dioulasso. We also learned about the consequences of climate change. And anything else that can follow the consequences on the population. We have learned a lot, and it really helped us to be more aware of what could happen what could happen to the population through climate change or because of climate change. Now, regarding what you have learned in this process and the awareness that you drew from this, based on your experience with the city of Bobo-Dioulasso, what would be for you the greatest risk for the city? What is the greatest risk regarding climate change consequences? Following our participation, what could happen to our city because of the drought and floodings? We have droughts, we have flooding. That could be a direct consequence to climate change in our city. Finally, if we want to continue talking about the impact of this in the long term, how would you measure the impact in the long term? The energy climate plan in our municipality, if it is adopted, it would really have positive repercussion on the life of the population in our city. If the population is educated, is taught on the good behavior and the good practices, therefore the people could live more happily. As a young women organization, women and young girls and other members of the population would have a better life. There would be a positive consequence on the life of the population. If the population is well taught, well educated, for example, with waste management, domestic waste, sorting waste, etc., that could have a positive consequence. Absolutely. The role of women is important, isn't it, in that process for raising awareness? Now, would you like to share your opinion about such an initiative with either the role of your organization regarding climate action plan? I think it's a beautiful initiative that we've had at Bobo-Dioulasso. Think about developing an energy climate plan for our city. If it did not exist, it would need to be created and invented. We would need to do it. If it is adopted, validated, I think we could have a better life than we've had so far. And the Young Women Organization is working on the protection of the environment, and we would be most happy to see this energy plan being validated for our city. Thank you very much, Mrs. Cambire, for sharing your testimony with us. And we wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup également. Thank you very much for this presentation. However, I don't see Chantal in the participants. I was told that she would be here today to answer the questions, unless she is registered with a different name. Could someone confirm that she's with us in case there is any question? Apparently not. Okay, then it's very sad. If there is any question for Chantal, don't hesitate to write it down in the chat, and we will transfer it to her later on. So we still have one last participant, one last speaker, but not least, Mrs. Elena Sancheri from UN Habitat, who is supporting the development of the SEACAP, what we call a joint SEACAP for 3 cities in Mozambique. Another very interesting concept to compare to what we have seen also before. So Mrs. Elena Sancheri is architect specialized in emergency architecture and resilience at IUAV University in Venice, urban resilience and development consultant at UN Habitat in Mozambique since 2018, and has experience in projects related to disaster risk management and reduction, climate change adaptation and urban resilience, as well as urban and metropolitan planning and development. Mrs. Sancheri, we have 2 questions for you. UN Habitat is supporting ASID in the implementation of COMSA in Mozambique. The approach that you will be using is joint SEACAP. Could you please explain us what is this approach in this context, and in what other context other signatories could consider this approach, and how is a joint SEACAP approach useful from a financing and implementation perspective?
Thank you very much, Marianne. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elena Sancheri. Thank you. I'm Elena Sancheri, and I'm from UN Habitat Mozambique. So today I would like to expose a bit the experience of a joint SEACAP in Maputo metropolitan area. Next, please. So as many of you probably know, urban population is growing, and it figures to grow to 7% in globally by 2050, and metropolitan areas are hosting 41% of the urban population. In Maputo, greater Maputo area is not an exception, or also Maputo metropolitan area, where Maputo city is forming a conurbation with the municipalities of Boane and Matola, and also with the district of Maracuene. And this area is currently facing a fast-paced urbanization. Next, please. So as you can see also from this image, actually 2.5 million people are living in this area, but it's pretty considerable because it's almost 10% of total Mozambique population. But this growth, the urbanization is uneven. Practically Maputo city, that is the center, economical center, the center of services, it's increasing its population by only 1% annually on average. While the other cities like Matola and Boane are facing a bigger increase of about 10% annually. Next, please. Talking about the climatical context, I think that also most of you know that Mozambique ranks 3rd among the African countries most exposed to weather hazards. So it's very vulnerable. Actually, it's also last year was selected also as the first more vulnerable country to climate change. And vulnerability also given by the fact that almost 60% of the population lives in coastal areas, since the major cities of Mozambique are actually placed in this, located in the coastal areas. And Maputo metropolitan area, with its 4 cities, it's not an exception. It's particularly exposed to droughts, cyclones, and floods, and this is also due to its location. Next, please. So in this context, we can say that Maputo area or Maputo metropolitan area that counts with these cities sees the cities with an environmental and socio-economic interrelations. And this could require to have a joint and integrated management. We can say that despite the the climatic situation, in any case, Mozambique is pretty committed to combat climate change and also climatic hazards. In Mozambique, there are 17 signatory cities since 2017. Maputo and Matola particularly only joined last year, but all the three cities, municipalities of Maputo metropolitan areas are signatories. Despite the need of joint integrated management in this area, the public transport is the first public space managed by with a metropolitan approach. It was the only one, but recently it was established also the water metropolitan service. So this is also a good sign, but we are still pretty far to go towards an institutionalization of Maputo metropolitan area. Next, please. So based on this context that I just illustrated, I can explain briefly which will be the approach and the methodology that we are going to use to develop this SEACAP in this area. So due to the particular interrelations, socioeconomic interrelations and dependencies that I also explained before, a joint approach will be adopted to develop implement the SEACAP in this area. The SEACAP will be coordinated, the implementation of the SEACAP will be coordinated by UN Habitat, but with obviously with strict coordination of the three municipalities before mentioned. Specific focal points will be designated in order to ensure also active participation and engagement of the municipalities, as also the colleagues before recommended. The time frame will be tentatively of 12 to 18 months, starting tentatively this month. And the implementation will be coordinated with and by local municipalities, but will be also supervised by national government through three main and key ministries. The Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Transport, and also Ministry of State Administration. And so we will establish a steering and a technical committee in order to ensure prompt coordination. And lastly, obviously, participatory approach will be key in the implementation of this plan, in order also to ensure sustainability, but also capacity building of technician and cities officials in order also to update the plan after the implementation. Next, please. So I will try very briefly to expose a bit which we are foreseeing that will be the challenges and which could be the opportunities also of this implementation. So first of all, I already explained a bit this issue, but despite being a reality, Maputo metropolitan area is not still institutionalized. This is something that it's not the only case of Maputo metropolitan area. But in Mozambique in general, there are a lot of conurbations with interdependencies of services, socioeconomic, etc., and also that are facing similar climatic vulnerabilities. But at the same time, we are not still institutionalized. In this context, vertical and horizontal coordination also still needs to be improved. And this can be challenging because especially vertical coordination between national government and local governments is something that it's key, as all of you know, also to respond to climatic hazards in an effective way. Moreover, as a third point, the existing lack of data in Mozambique, especially at urban level, is a major challenge. And this could impose to adapt the SEACAP tool at the local context. Besides this, obviously, since we are trying to tackle and implement with a joint approach, a SEACAP with a joint approach, we will have metropolitan projects and also municipal projects in the project portfolio, but obviously will need to be coordinated. Thus, this is also a great opportunity in order to have also more considerable fundraising, also stronger projects. Next, please. So finally, I'm trying to introduce also some more opportunities. Actually, also some of the challenges can turn into opportunities. But first of all, the joint SEACAP will be one of the first, or practically the first plan or normative instrument at metropolitan level in this area. So it could be really able to demonstrate the urgency of institutionalize the greater Maputo area as a metropolitan area. Actually, it's under development currently, SAMP, that is a sustainable urban mobility plan. Even it's pretty much more strategic compared to this specific plan. But despite this, we think that this can really be a sign to support also this area to go towards its institutionalization. Second of all, obviously, this also the creation of the steering and technical committee can create a space of coordination and of dialogue between local authorities and also with the central authorities in order also to tackle the challenge explained before. And obviously, it can create the elaboration of this plan, can create a database at metropolitan level that would be very precious, and also to increase the availability of data in these three cities. And lastly, this case could really become a reference for our signatory cities in the country to develop similar plans. So thank you very much. I can proceed in trying also to reply to the two questions that Marianne posed before. So regarding the first question, the approach the approach that we will be using is a joint SEACAP approach. Why is this approach appropriate for this context, and in what other context should signatories consider this approach? So I think I already pretty replied to this before during the presentation, but actually a joint SEACAP is an adequate approach specifically for this case of Maputo metropolitan area, because it really can allows the three municipalities to establish, maybe for the first time, a dialogue and also a joint planning opportunity to respond to climatic hazards, specifically to climate change, with common objectives and also efforts. Moreover, also the metropolitan approach is key to allow also more autonomy to municipalities, because obviously this could allow to create a space that currently doesn't exist, besides the creation of the establishment of the metropolitan transport agencies. So this approach, I think I can suggest to apply this approach to mainly 3 areas, I think. The first one, obviously, is to institutionalize the metropolitan areas or region, especially if they have several interdependencies. Second of all, could be to urban areas that share common challenges in terms of climate adaptation and mitigation, and obviously that would like us to join efforts for planning and also for fundraising. Lastly, I can suggest also this approach to situations similar to Maputo metropolitan area, so practically other conurbations or urban areas with considerable expansion trends and that are strictly interrelated, but with no adequate territorial planning framework, and with, we can say, limited or appropriate framework and planning instruments at metropolitan scale. So lastly, the last question was about how is a joint SEACAP approach useful from a financing and implementation perspective. So I think this is a very interesting question, because first of all, the joint SEACAP can support municipalities, to me, as I also explained a bit before, to be more independent compared to central government, to find resources for climate action at urban level or regional level in this case. Since in this specific case, Maputo metropolitan area is not institutionalized, so it can allow us to create a space that otherwise wouldn't exist. But at the same time, this is, I think, applicable to all the 3 cases I mentioned before. This joint SEACAP could really allow municipality to be more autonomous in fundraising, but also to have more power to fundraise and to fundraise for more relevant projects. So it means practically it allows to join efforts in order to have also a stronger product and a stronger plan. So I think this is all. Thank you very much, and looking forward to have a fruitful plenary session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena, and we also wish you full success for this work, because you're just starting. I didn't get a chance to present at the beginning what Expertise France is doing. We are working in 4 countries, Mali, Togo, Uganda, and Kenya. And actually in Mali, we are doing something very similar to what you are doing. In Bamako, we are working with the district of Bamako, which is composed of 6 municipalities. And in Ségou, we are working with the intercommunality of Balazan, which is also composed of 4 municipalities. So we are doing something very similar, and I can ensure you that it's working very well. We have already finished the baseline studies, and we are now really in the process of defining the actions. So it's we really encourage you to go this way, and we think it's a very promising approach. So I think now it's time to open the floor to the participants. Unfortunately, we don't have so much time. I'm just asking Tara, how much time do we have for the questions? 20 minutes, maybe?
Yeah, I think that should be fine. I'll speak to the other hosts too and let you know.
All right, thank you very much. So we didn't get many questions in the chat, so you can still write. If you have any question, you can write in the chat, or you can raise your hand with the button raising your hand if you have any question to our speakers. Otherwise, I do have a few questions to our speakers. So maybe I will start while other questions are coming. So the first question will be to our first speaker, Kirsty. Kirsty, in terms of communication, what have some of the COMESA signatories done to ensure good communication, and who is so important, and what is so important to, no, who is so important to communicate to, sorry. So what are the cities communicating about, and who are they targeting?
Thanks, Marianne. So this is probably quite a layered question, but in terms of what needs to be communicated, so the main thing that needs to be communicated is the actions within the SEACAP themselves. So what are the cities really pushing to include in there? What could affect the communities on the ground? So it's mostly communicating the actions within the SEACAP, and then who these actions need to be communicated to would then be anyone who is explicitly involved in the actual implementation of that action. And as I mentioned in my presentation earlier, it would be the people who they need to be involved in co-development, but on the off chance that they're not involved in the co-development, we would need to be communicating what would be coming up their way in their departments, what they would need to start thinking about. And then also we need to be communicating the SEACAP actions to the mayor. As Matthias said earlier, we need that high level political buy-in. The mayor needs to know what's happening so they can really promote the SEACAP implementation from their side. And then last but not least, but to keep it concise, if there are actions that need to be externally funded, you would need to catch the attention of the funders that you're planning on going to ask for support early on in the game, ideally even inviting them to be participatory in the SEACAP action prioritization process, which involves adding a lot more detail to those actions. And then if possible, the communities on the ground who would be affected by these actions. So really, and again, as Matthias said, bringing them along in the process. It's not about developing a SEACAP in isolation and sort of looking at the data is very important, but going beyond the science, because the science is really important, but the social side is really important as well. So bringing along the communities who would be affected or have to implement those actions themselves. So really making sure that they're aware of what's coming their way so they can be involved as well.
Right. Thank you very much for this these examples. If we still don't have any hand, maybe I will ask another question to our second speaker, to Matthews. Matthews, during the opening ceremony this morning, Mrs. Kobe Brandt mentioned that the local government should premeditate climate and development finance opportunities from the onset of planning. Do you have any thought on how this could be done?
So you said prioritizing from the onset?
From the planning, yeah. How can they premeditate climate and development finance opportunities from the planning phase?
Right. So I think the most important thing for climate action planning is how do you transform a plan into action? And for that to happen, you need financing. So I think that the most important thing when you're starting to do or you're developing a plan is to think what is feasible. And for that, you need to have some kind of analysis. Within C40, we do have the action selection and prioritization process, which is basically a process in which we rank the actions according to their impact, feasibility, viability, political buy-in. So that's really important, because if you have a very interesting action, a very impactful action, but with little feasibility, with little possibility of finding financing, it won't be implementable. So what I would say is that early in the process, feasibility needs to be considered as one of the key criteria to define which actions will be prioritized or not. And analyzing that is important, but I would make an exception here because things can change as well. So sometimes feasibility will be something in the beginning and then it will change in the end. In Salvador's case, we had electric buses in the beginning was not very feasible, but now it's quite feasible because the mayor is interested in it and pushing it forwards. So I think the discussion on feasibility is really important from the beginning, but also ambition is really important as well in planning. Because if you are ambitious and you put out actions that might not be too feasible, but that can be defended by the mayor and pushed forwards, then you'll actually be able to find financing because you have political buy-in. So it's a bit of a trade-off, and it requires knowledge, studies, analytical studies, but also a bit of the ambition of the city itself.
Thank you very much. I see videos turning on. Those people wanting, yeah, I see a hand raised, Mr. Dose Akiti. You can activate your microphone and ask your question.
Merci. Je voudrais vous remercier, les intervenants, pour la qualité des présentations. Nous sommes une jeune commune suite à la décentralisation. Nous sommes à Lomé, au Togo. Notre commune s'appelle commune de Golfe 1, dont le maire est M. Gomado Kwame Gnokpo. Nous avons, pour cerner les différents problèmes et besoins de la commune, le maire a initié un projet d'élaboration du plan de développement communal et nous sommes à la phase de validation. Nous avons intégré des aspects climatiques, mais comme nous sommes signataires d'initiatives comme ça, il nous est demandé de pouvoir élaborer du moins le plan, ne serait-ce que réunir le plan ce qui concerne la vulnérabilité climatique. Et nous voulons, dans le cadre donc, de cette perspective, en suivant les différentes interventions, réunir les différents acteurs susceptibles d'intervenir dans le processus est un gage du succès. Nous voulons savoir comment mobiliser efficacement ces différents acteurs susceptibles d'intervenir dans le processus. Car notre ambition du maire, c'est de pouvoir commencer.
Très bien,
Voilà
je vous remercie.
notre préoccupation.
Je remercie beaucoup, monsieur. Je vais peut-être prendre cette question. I don't know if the question was already translated into English or if I should do it. Mr. Dosseakiti represents the municipality of Golfer, which is part of Lomé in Togo. And they have to develop, it's one of the new city that was created, new town that was created in 2019 after the municipal elections. And they have to develop their municipality development plans and to integrate climate issues into those plans. But as they are a member of the COMESESA as well, they also have to develop their PIDEC, and they want to know how to bring all the right stakeholders in the process. So I will answer in French, if you don't mind. Je crois que nous avons été en contact déjà, monsieur.
Contact, maybe not with you, but perhaps with somebody from the community. So I want to thank you very much for your interest to the integration of these climate stakes, and to reassure you, I'd like to say that at the Covenant of the Mayors and the GRC, which developed the methodology, it doesn't oblige communities to develop an action plan for climate and energy on the side or on top of the PDC. So that's a good thing. If you are able to integrate the recommendations of the methodology, come SSA, it can be validated as a climate plan. The conditions are to have the 3 diagnosis analysis, analyze of risks and vulnerabilities, and access to energy. So I don't know if this was already done, and to gather all the actors together. You are lucky. Expertise France, we are working in Togo on the Mayor's Convention, and we're trying to gather a pool of actors, a pool of experts who are training on the tools of the convention. And we know that all communities do not necessarily have the right resources to integrate these technical stakes and objectives. But I see that in some people in the participants, a certain number of NGOs and study offices that are used to working with these tools. And we are now developing training sessions to really know how to use these tools. We had organized a training session specifically on the GRC tools at the end of the month, but with the new restrictions of the government, we had to cancel it. But this will be postponed to later. How to integrate the different actors. We saw it in different presentations. I think all of the speakers mentioned it. You need to have a mapping of the actors that are concerned by the theme in the communities, national actors, regional actors, civil society actors, and technical partners of financiers, the funders, sorry. And it's important to embed all of these from the integration phase. That way they can understand very well and help you understand what is important to embed in your climate plan. So all of these actors need to be identified. We can help you to do so. It was done with other communities in Togo. Other communities in Togo can help you to do so. And during the session at the end of September, we had to have the returns on experiences from different cities, and you can contact them. I think there are representatives of Palimé here today in this session. You can ask them which actors are around the table. It's important to integrate CET for the energy part. Do not forget them. And I won't take more time, but do not hesitate to contact me and I will tell you more about it in Lomé. I hope I answered your question.
D'autres questions? Sorry, I'm switching back to English. I answered in French because we work in Togo. Expertise France works in Togo, so we are in touch already with this city, and we will work together. So, any other question from the audience? If not, I still have 2 questions for our speakers. If we have time, Tara, I don't know, do we have time for 2 quick questions?
I think if we make them very quick, Marianne, otherwise we should.
Yeah, I see you wrote me. It's okay. We can leave it here if you think it's over.
Perfect. Unfortunately, I think we should wrap up so we can prepare for the next session. Thanks.
Thank you. So I would like to thank you all. First, our speakers, of course, for their wonderful presentations and very insightful examples that we got. I hope they were very useful for our participants. I hope you managed to maybe take some contacts that you can later be in touch with to get more information. And I would like to take this opportunity to tell you that we will have another COMSA Day, hopefully, if COVID allows, next year in May, from 17 to 21 of May in Kisumu, in Kenya. That will be during the AfriCities Summit. The COMSA Day will be organized by Expertise France. And we really hope that we will be able to meet in presence during that event. So we wish to see you there next year. Thank you very much, and I wish you, there is the session on adaptation, so I invite you to follow the next session on adaptation, and I wish you a nice day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.